Now in this example, they don't give us a point that the terminal side of the angle goes through. They tell us the line that forms the terminal side of the angle. So to figure this out, we need to find a point that's on this line, and they gave us an extra condition here that x is less than or equal to 0. This is saying that x is negative. That means that our terminal side of our angle is going to be over here somewhere to the left of the y-axis. So we just need to find one point on this line. So I'm just going to make myself a little xy table. I'm going to pick a value for x that's negative so that it'll fill this condition. I'm going to pick -2 for x. And then I'm just going to plug it back into this equation and solve for y. So if I divide both sides by 2, I get y equals -3. So there's my point that's on the terminal side of the angle. Now I can draw my picture. So I have the point -2, -3. So there's the terminal side of my angle. So again, if I wanted to draw a positive measure angle, I would go this direction. I could also draw it as a negative measure angle by making it go clockwise. I have my x is -2, my y is -3. I still need to find my r. I'm putting both my x and my y in parentheses since they're both negative. When I square them, I get 2 positive numbers, and I end up with the square root of 13 for my r, and I can't simplify that anymore. Another thing about putting the parentheses around the negative numbers is that if you want to simplify this with your calculator, you would have to put the parentheses in there for your calculator to give you the correct answer. So now I have my x is -2, my y is -3, and my r is the square root of 13. So I can go ahead and find the values of my 6 functions. Sine is y over r, so that would be -3 over the square root of 13. Now in some places you'll be expected to rationalize the denominator for answers like this. If you remember from algebra, to rationalize the denominator when we have a square root in the denominator, we can just take the top and bottom by that square root. So to do this, we would take the top and the bottom times the square root of 13. That would give us -3 times the square root of 13 on the top. And then the square root of 13 times itself actually cancels out the square root, so now we've got just a 13 on the bottom. So this would be one form of the answer, and this would be another form of the answer with the denominator rationalized. And from here, if we wanted to do cosecant of theta, we could take this original answer and just flip it over. So that would give us square root of 13 over -3. We can write the negative out in front like that. Then let's go on to do cosine. Our x was -2, so cosine would be -2 over the square root of 13. Again, if we wanted to rationalize the denominator, we would take the top and the bottom times the square root of 13, which would give us -2 times the square root of 13 over 13. And while we're at it, we can look at secant of theta. We can just take this answer and flip it over. So that would be negative square root of 13 over 2. And then last of all, to do tangent and cotangent. Tangent is y over x, so this would be -3 over -2. We could simplify that to 3/2. Cotangent is x over y, so that would be -2 over -3, or we could take this answer and flip it over. Either way, that would simplify to +2/3. In this example, we just know what the degree measure of the angle is. And for all of these, I would really recommend that you go ahead and draw the picture. If our angle is 360 degrees, then that's going all the way around our circle and coming back here. So that means that our terminal side is the positive x-axis. There are lots of different ways we could find the values of the trig functions for this, but if we're thinking of using a point on the terminal side to find those 6 trig functions, then we can just pick any point that would be on this positive x-axis. To make this easy, I'm going to pick the point 1, 0. So that gives us an x value of 1, and it gives us a y value of 0. Then if we go to find our r, we can use the formula for this. We would have 1 squared plus 0 squared. And we would get r equals 1. Or another way we could look at it is that the r is just supposed to be the distance from the origin to our point. Since this is just a horizontal line, we already know that that distance is 1. Now that we have those 3, we can find the values of our trig functions. So sine of theta is y over r. That's 0 over 1, which is going to give us 0. Cosine of theta is x over r. That's going to be 1 over 1, which simplifies to 1. And tangent of theta is y over x. That would be 0 over 1, which simplifies to 0. And when we go to do the reciprocal functions, with some of these we're going to run into a problem. For example, with cosecant, cosecant is r over y, which would be 1 over 0. In that case, we're dividing by 0, which is undefined. So the cosecant for this angle, we would just say is undefined. For the secant, that's the reciprocal of cosine. The reciprocal of 1 is 1, or we could do r over x. Either way, we would get 1 for the secant. And for the cotangent, if we try to do the reciprocal of 0, we're going to get 1 over 0, which is undefined. Or if we use the definition, cotangent is x over y, which would be 1 over 0. So that one's also undefined. One more example for this. This time we have the point. Our point is 0, -5. So that means this is the terminal side of our angle, so the negative y-axis. So our angle theta, if we wanted to draw it as a positive measure angle, we could draw it like this. So actually, this tells us that our angle theta is 270 degrees. Now again, we could find the r by using the x and the y in the formula, or we could just look at our picture and figure out how many units it would be from the origin down to this point. So that would be 5 units. So we have our x equals 0, y equals -5, and r equals 5. So for sine of theta, that's y over r. -5 over 5 simplifies to -1. For cosine of theta, we'd have 0 over 5, which simplifies to 0. And for tangent of theta, we'd have y over x. We get -5 over 0, Since we're trying to divide by 0 there, this would be undefined. For our other three functions, the cosecant would be just this flipped over, which would also simplify to -1. Our secant would be our cosine flipped over. That would be 5/0, which would be undefined. For our cotangent, we would have the reciprocal of this, which would be 0/-5, so that would be 0.